Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time you are viewing this podcast, our series that we call Race, Culture, and the Church. Race, Culture, and the Church. And I am so pleased to have, again, I think this is your fourth time with us, but now in a new role, retired Chief of Police for the City of Sacramento, Daniel Hahn.
Thanks
Chief,
for having me.
Thank you. And I can continue to call you Chief.
Sure.
Okay,
Just don't call me a cuss word.
I'll try and be on my best behavior. It's kind of like being president. You're always Mr. President,
Right.
even though you're no longer the president. So, Chief, so good to see you. So good to see you sporting the new beard.
Yeah, first time in my entire life.
And no tie. Although
no
you may
tie.
have not worn a tie from time to time in the past, but I like the casual look. So
Thank you. Thank you.
There's life after policing.
Apparently so, yes.
So they tell you.
So they tell me.
So you retired effectively December 31st?
Yes,
Okay, so
Yes.
we're into our fourth month,
Yes.
almost fifth month now.
yes.
What's the transition been like?
Well, to be honest, I had planned on having like a full-time job within a week or two of me retiring, and that didn't happen. So I'm doing probably 4 or 5 different kind of things, different jobs and things like that. And I thought the reason why I wanted a full-time job is that I would go stir crazy, not going somewhere every day and having work. But I can tell you in the last couple months, it's been pretty nice. Working out a couple times a day and kind of planning my own day and figuring out these part-time jobs that I do when I want to do them. So it's been pretty nice. But I am starting some full-time work, and but it'll be much more flexible than obviously police chief, and definitely less stressful. I don't think, or I know, I didn't think I was that stressed as a police chief. With all the stuff that's going on, I've always felt I handle stress pretty well. And in just a short time I've been retired, I've kind of realized how stressful work was, because things are so laid back now, and I'm starting to realize, well, I was pretty stressed.
So I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah.
So give me some of the telltale signs that you are exhibiting in terms of not being stressed. Now you're, you don't snap. You don't. What has let you know that you were really stressed?
Yeah, I just think just the way you feel. I don't, every time I see something on the news, I don't cringe. I'm not worrying about this or that. I still have my hand in law enforcement to some extent. Department of Justice flew me out to DC to review a training course, and I still communicate with the current police chief whenever she calls to ask my opinion on things, but it's not on me now. So you can just feel it. You just feel more relaxed. You're more laid back. So yeah, you can just tell within like a couple weeks. Needless to say, I lost about 24 pounds since I've retired too. But that's from probably healthier eating, and definitely most days I get to work out either 2 or 3 times a day.
I need to follow your regiment. Obviously, I'm missing something. Your eyes and your ears probably are seen and tuned a little bit differently now that you're not in the role of chief of police. But are we experiencing an uptick in violent crime, or is this we're just looking at something that just occurs over the arc of history?
I wouldn't call it an uptick because it's much more significant than that. We're a major spike in violent crime across the country. And I could have told you it was coming. And we're not even to the summer months yet. So I think we are in for an extremely violent summer.
As a sad term that was spoken about, I believe it was Detroit, the long, hot summer. So what makes you, without divulging anything you can't divulge, what makes you think that we are in for quite an e-ticket ride this summer?
Well, first I'll say in terms of divulging things, I'm retired. So
So everything's on the table.
I divulge everything now. And not that I didn't, I was very honest and direct when I was police chief, but there's also always a concern on some of the things that I will talk about in a minute. When you're police chief, you have to be very measured how you speak about these things, because I never wanted to make it harder on the men and women that had to go out and perform a very critical role in uniform, and make it harder on our community. So, but now I'm not the police chief, and so I've been much more direct over the last 3 or 4 months, whether it's in interviews or social media or all those sort of things. And the reason why we're in for a violent summer, in my opinion, is because we haven't done anything to not be in a violent summer. And the things that we've already heard from our leaders, both community leaders, elected leaders, leaders in various segments of our society, is the same thing we've heard from our leaders throughout the past. And we continue to go through these cycles where there's, years of violent crime, then we do certain things, crime goes down, then we do certain things and crime goes back up. And so after you saw the mass shooting downtown, you heard leaders say we need more gun laws. We need to make more laws that say certain things regarding certain guns are illegal. And it's not that I don't think we should always be looking at laws regarding guns, because right now you can go online and you can purchase, and I'm not a gun guy, but you can purchase a device that you can install on your handgun that makes your handgun fully automatic, and you can do that online. And I'm told pretty much anybody can install. You don't have to be a gun person to be able to install that. One of the shooters in the downtown mass shooting had a fully automatic handgun. So if you know anything about how guns work, trying to hold a fully automatic weapon with one hand, like a handgun,
very little control.
No control. Yeah, and now you can kind of tell how so many people were shot. And then on top of that, you have a heavy extended magazine in the gun, which makes the gun very heavy. So it's not that I don't think we should look at laws, but when our leaders talk about that, that's the solution. If we just had some more gun laws, we wouldn't have these mass shootings.
Or as I like to say, if I'm a hammer, every solution is a nail.
Yeah.
So why the summer of 22 versus the summer of 21 or 20 or 2019? Is there something that, is this just the continuing, we're going down the path and we're just finally, to borrow from Malcolm X, the chickens are coming home to roost? Or is there something special that you see or sensing?
Well, you mentioned 2021 and 2020. Violent crime was up in those years too. Last year broke a record. There was more guns recovered on our streets than ever in the history of our city last year. There was more homicides in our city last year than in the last 15, 16 years. So this is a continuation of what's been increasing over the last couple of years. But I think as a whole, the reason why crime and violent crime is increasing is what I guess I call a perfect storm, and then with no real solutions, which is typical of our society. And the perfect storm is we've had COVID for the last couple of years, which has pretty much decimated anybody, especially people without money. So if you just take like my family, for example, we're doing okay.
You're blessed.
We're very blessed. I had a very good job that paid very good money, and my wife is a school teacher, very good job that pays decent money. So when our daughters were sent home because of COVID to do what ended up being a year and a half that we never expected, we just went right down to the Best Buy and bought. My older daughter had a laptop at the time, but my younger daughter didn't. So we just drove down to the Best Buy like it was nothing and bought her a laptop that was almost $1,000. Didn't blink an eye. Went home, we already had Wi-Fi, and they did their school, and they still had challenges in certain classes. My wife had students that didn't have laptops and did not have Wi-Fi. And when they did have Wi-Fi, it was very shaky Wi-Fi. So here you are, a couple of the students were already behind And now for the last year and a half, they've had to learn math with their Wi-Fi going out every third minute. So there's COVID with all the sports, all the extracurricular activity, the parks, everything's shut down. And I always wondered to our leaders, what do you expect people to do in the neighborhood like I grew up in, just stay in their apartment for the next 2 years? That's not gonna happen. So you gotta think about these things, how it impacts different neighborhoods. Yet, like our health order allowed golf to continue. So I'd drive by a golf course and I'd see 2 people riding in a golf cart. I'd see them standing around the hole with their golf clubs within not 6 feet apart. And all that's okay per the health order. Yet a kid can't go by himself to the park and shoot a basketball. So it's disparate kind of results. I don't think anybody that wrote those orders intended that. But then you had, summers of protest that brings unrest, takes resources from our neighborhoods to center them like in Sacramento downtown for night after night after night. You had zero bail that came from COVID. You had this new push to release people early from their sentence as opposed to, hey, we think there's people in custody that don't necessarily need to be there. And so we need to give them resources, reentry, all sorts of resources to help them integrate back into their communities and get work. Well, instead of doing all that, we just let them out. And I don't know.
Is that just because it's easy?
I think, yeah, because I think too many times we are looking for political wins. And so if we say we're going to let people out early, that makes some people happy. But we don't really think about the ramifications of that. I do believe there's people in custody that don't necessarily need to be there. But I also believe if you're not going to hold them in custody, how are you helping to ensure that they're going to be successful members of our community? And that takes resources. That takes reentry programs. That takes, things that were never set up. We just opened the doors. And now we've seen in some of these recent shootings, these are people that had, like in this last one, 10-year sentence, did 4 years and got out, even though the parole board said, don't let them out.
In that case, and it's one of the things that's kind of, I don't say annoyed, but bothered me. So they stay for their full term. They're still getting out. They
still need reentry services, yes. And they still need some sort of, what do we expect this person to do? He or she has been in custody for 10 years. And I don't know how many people have gone to a prison, but they're a whole different world.
Correct.
And you can't just open that door. And especially somebody that's been in there a long time, the world looks completely different to them than it did when they went in. And if I have a 6th grade education and I was a gang member or a drug dealer, I know how to do those things. But if you just let me out without any assistance, any reentry program, hopefully some people that have gone through that themselves that can understand the challenges that somebody coming out of custody all those years to reintegrate, I'm gonna struggle. And eventually I might go back to what I know. And so I think we do a very poor job, and I just wonder the people that just let folks out, I'm like, what do you expect this person to do if they have no help, integrating back into society after being in custody so long?
Well, Chief, our Cracker Jack research team, that's me, did scrape off the internet nice picture of Chief Hahn in dress blues, not dress blues, in your uniform. And I was reading the article, and one of the things, there are a few things that stood out. Our divisive environment doesn't allow a collaborative approach to remedy these challenges you were just talking about. Our self-righteousness based on political affiliations prevents collaboration. We speak and act without knowing. That's, I don't say you were torching bridges, but you weren't holding.
I told you.
You weren't holding back. So Daniel Hahn, Chief of Police, City of Sacramento, retired. if you were mayor or on the city
I
council,
would never be mayor.
if you were mayor, I knew that was coming. I knew that. But if you were, so what are you going to do?
Well, first of all, I think you need to split what you would do into two groups. One, the here and now, the short term. So, in regards to violence, how do you prevent violence downtown? But more importantly, how do you prevent the daily violence we have in some of our neighborhoods? So when violence happens in the Heights, we don't pay any attention at all. But if it happens on K Street Mall, it's the end of the world and we have something to do. And I think we fail by doing that quite a bit. But what I would probably focus on more if I was mayor, which again, I will reiterate, that will never happen.
It's funny. Just keep saying that. Just
no
keep saying it. It'll never
possibility
happen.
under the sun that would happen.
Okay. All right.
I would concentrate more on the what I feel is the long term. So, even after this mass shooting, you heard people talk about the mayor and others talk about gun laws. First of all, the guns they had were already illegal. So we're talking about let's make illegal guns illegal. That seems a little silly to me. The other thing we talked about is give community organizations, some of which do really good work, some of which don't, more funding to interrupt this gang violence. And that's important, just the same as looking at gun laws is important. But when they're both sold as the answer, we fail. No, 100% we fail because they're not the answer. They are part of the answer. So as mayor, I would try to get people to collaborate around the long-term solution, which is poverty, health, education. Neighborhoods like the Heights have been like the Heights for far too long. And they didn't used to be like that. They used to be thriving neighborhoods. Sacramento used to be thriving neighborhoods. And the reason they stopped being thriving neighborhoods because we, humans, leaders in our city and in our state, removed the economic vitality out of these neighborhoods with things like Highway 160, Highway 99, redlining downtown that we did urban renewal, tore it down and built commercial buildings. And now we want to drive everybody down there to spend their money down there so our tax increment financing could be refunded. So all the businesses in Oak Park went away. All the businesses in Del Paso Heights went away. What people don't know is the Bank of America on Del Paso Boulevard in Del Paso Heights was the second largest in terms of money for a district its size in Bank of America's whole portfolio at one point. 35th Street in Oak Park was considered and called the second downtown because it had such thriving businesses and was the place to be. They're not like that anymore. When I grew up here, that was all gone. So once it became impoverished, then the crime came. Not the other way around. I don't care what anybody says if they know their history. It was thriving neighborhoods. We took the businesses, the jobs, the economic vitality out. Then they became impoverished, and then crime came. So that also gives me hope, though, because that tells you this poverty that we see in our neighborhoods is not inevitable. It's not the natural course of things. It's human-made. It's people-made. It's leaders-made. So if we created poverty, impoverished neighborhoods, we can fix impoverished neighborhoods. But we do that in neighborhoods like North Natomas, where we've brought $1 billion hotel, where we've talked about moving Cal Expo. By the way, Cal Expo used to be in Oak Park and is part of the downfall of Oak Park when you took it out. We talked about moving Cal Expo out to North Natomas. We just unveiled it this week, almost $20 million aquatic center that's going to bring people from all over the state for competitions and things like that. And we say things that make everybody feel good. This is the city's aquatic center. This is a regional aquatic center. People from all over our city, please tell me the first time you see a kid from Meadowview catching probably 6 different buses to get to North Natomas to go swimming in a swimming pool when they have the Pinnell Center right there.
Well, let me read this, what someone said again. Our divisive environment doesn't allow a collaborative approach to remedy these challenges.
That's where I would be working with people to figure out how do we invest in neighborhoods like this the same way we invest, and by invest I don't mean hand out money, Invest means, how did we get the aquatic center in North Natomas? How do we get something similar that brings thousands of people to it that then will eat at the restaurants, stay at the hotels, patronize the businesses, so this neighborhood and Meadowview and Del Paso Heights can be thriving? As a reporter asked me shortly after that mass shooting, once the department announced that it was gang fueled, I asked them, I'm like, are there any gangs in our thriving neighborhoods? Fab 40s, Land Park.
Depends on
North
how you define
Natomas.
gangs, I guess.
Well, street gangs like they were talking about. Yes, exactly. And they said, well, no. I go, well, why do you think that is? Well, why do you think there's not gangs in the Fab 40s? There's kids in the there's young people in the Fab 40s. People have kids in that neighborhood too. How come they're not in a street gang shooting at people on the K Street Mall? And I'm like, I'll tell you why. Because they're thriving neighborhoods. They have resources. They have hope. They have dreams. They have resources when they need them. When they get into challenging times, they're able to get through them. In neighborhoods like I grew up, you see trauma every day. I witnessed a murder when I was 9 years old. That's not normal. But luckily for me, I had my mom and my family that unbeknownst to me, was a very stable home that helped me deal with that. A lot of my friends would go home and the trauma's inside their house too. And so were people successful in those circumstances? Sure, there was every once in a while a success story that came out of that, but more often than not, that consumes you. And pretty soon that gang is looking pretty good to you. Belonging, family, something to do. And you don't believe other things are for you anymore, because the gang thrives off of exploiting people and intimidation. And so pretty soon that's who you are.
Sounds like you're describing a supportive environment. We'd call them families. How do, from your retired position, now you can think about these things a little more thoughtfully. How do we then help foster those environments, those supportive systems, without supplanting or attempting to replace? I understand if you have absentee parents or opportunity. It seems like we deal with much of our activity, and I want to get back to what you were talking about, CBOs, figuring out which ones are doing good, which ones aren't doing good. How do we not try and get in the way of the family, but support the family to do the things that the families in the Fab 40s are doing?
Yeah. I think that's multifaceted. So the government or the city can help, right? They can, the same way they help in the North Natomas, they can go recruit businesses and large corporations and things to relocate here. They can assist by greasing the wheels with permit processes and things like that. So it's not about just handing out money. It's about creating an environment where people have purpose, value, and those sort of things. The other half, though, is as a community, we have work to do too. So I always talk about my mom, because my mom, for most of my life, was a single mom. My dad died when I was 5. And she had me, who I wouldn't wish me on anybody when I was a kid. My sister, who had significant disabilities, and then my older brother, and then ultimately 2 stepbrothers, and it was my mom. So how did she survive when all her family lived back in Minnesota and she stayed here? Well, because she felt community was family too. So on our block, everybody knew everybody. Miss Curtis, Mr. Bozeman across the street. My best friend lived on the other side of the block. But my mom allowed me to have like second moms and second dads. My best friend's parents would be like my parents. And what I see today is a lot of times is, don't you talk to my son or daughter? Don't you do this or that to my son? My mom didn't do that. Like my mom, I think she never told me this, but I think she thought, I need help. And I need to allow other people to pour into my son. I can't be selfish and expect that I'm the only person that can pour into my son, especially since I'm adopted, I'm African-American, my mom was white, so she wanted me to understand and be part of my culture. But also she was a single mom. She was pulled in a million different directions and very active in the community and an activist and all those sort of things. So she didn't have the time to give me what she thought I needed. So she allowed other people to pour into me too. And as a father now, I can see why that's hard. Because at times I'm kind of like, no. My daughters I'm all my daughters need, right? You know, the only requirement I have for coaches and stuff in the many sports as they play is that I'm not going to let them play for a coach that has completely different value system than me and my wife. That's my only requirement. You can be hard on them. You can do all that. But if you have a completely different value system than me, then we got to go to a different team because I won't allow that to be poured into my girls. So I think there's work on both sides. I think we as a society need to start thinking about our impoverished neighborhoods similar to how we do other neighborhoods in terms of thinking that economic vitality is important in those neighborhoods. And as a community, as people, as families, I just don't think we were where we were back when I was growing up and probably even before that in the 60s and 50s, where we were kind of a lot more communal, a lot more, allow people to help raise our families and children's and looked at the community as a family now.
I'm concerned that we're playing social whack-a-mole. That, as I've shared, obviously Oak Park is ground zero for gentrification. It's
Doesn't have to be.
It's been written up, on a national level. You want to see gentrification, say, on steroids, the 95817. Change is inevitable. I'm about positive change in all of its facets. But my concern is, as we change, as the storefronts, the broken glass is replaced with fixed glass, and the storefronts are improved, and the businesses are thriving, that much of what was is just been pushed to another area. One of the things that, again, the Cracker Jack team found out, this is what you said: I benefited from a community that collaborated to help raise me, had faith in me, celebrated my accomplishments, and held me accountable when I fell short of my potential. It can be done, but we must stop tearing each other down. We must stop dividing and demonizing others simply because we have different opinions. We must work together for the betterment of everyone. I don't think there's anyone that would disagree with that. But I'll go back to my point again. If I'm going on a destination from here to New York, one, it's got to be a shared vision that we're going from here to New York, and then how we're going to get there. Are we going to walk? Are we going to take a train? Are we going to drive a car? Are we going to fly? How are we going to get there? Are we capable of making that decision and getting there?
No, not right now.
I guess that ends our podcast.
Yeah. Well, I just think we have work to do before we can get there. And I think we can do it, but we have to want to do it. So I'll give you an example. The mass shooting that happened downtown, it was immediately called a mass shooting because really the definition of a mass shooting is something like 4 or more people that are shot. That's the extent of what a mass shooting is. So it's still a mass shooting. There was 18 people shot and 6 of them died. But about 2 days later, or maybe it was a week later, sometime after the shooting, the police department announced that it was a gang-fueled shooting. And I immediately, so before that, when it was a mass shooting, people were, what are we gonna do? Something has to change. And it felt like—
There were flowers and candles on the corner.
Yeah, and it felt like people were demanding maybe more of a holistic kind of response to this sort of thing so these don't continue to happen. The minute the police department said it was gang-related, all that went away.
Yep.
And it narrowed back down to a single thing: keep people locked up, and this won't happen again. There was even people arguing, stop calling it a mass shooting. It's a gang shooting. It's both. It's a mass shooting, and it's a gang shooting. And you see, if it's gang-related, if it's black related, all of a sudden we don't have to have a holistic approach anymore. The answer is just lock them up. And to me, that's a perfect example of why we're not ready to have those collaborative, or not why, but a proof that we're not ready yet. Like, why does it matter that it's gang related? How do you don't you want that person to not be in a gang? If he wasn't in a gang, he wouldn't have been in that shooting. And so it's the same as I said before, is if all we do is give money to CBOs, if all we do is make gun laws to make illegal guns more illegal, there's this never-ending line of people
Correct.
that are feeding the need for CBOs to do more work. The neighborhood's not changing. Lives are still being lost by the dozens, and it's just a line around the block.
Well, that's why I call it whack-a-mole.
I want to cut off the line.
Correct.
I don't want the line to be there anymore. I want kids to grow up in this neighborhood and not have the biggest presence that they see every day is this gang that's trying to get you to do negative things that impact your positive future. I want the alternatives to be way more. I want to cut the legs off of the gangs. I want them to not be able to, I want their marketing team to go out of business.
As they say with even fighting fires, how do you starve a fire? You take away the oxygen.
Right. I mean, the reality is why do you think, and I guess it's hard if you didn't grow up in a neighborhood with gangs maybe, but why do you think kids at 10, 11 years old join gangs?
I think you're being kind. Again, I try not to put myself in a position of entering into the conversation per se, but I think it's more choice than ignorance.
I agree. Well, I think it's both.
It's both, but I could be wrong. I think it's more choice than ignorance. I choose to do certain things. Maybe it's more expedient. Let me kick the can down the road. That's the next person's issue. This is a heavy lift. I don't want to have to do that, whatever that is going to require me rolling up my sleeves, getting dirty, and really experiencing ebbs and flows of success and disappointment. It's easier to just lock people up.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I'll say, to me, a lot of it has to start with our leaders. And when I say leaders, that comes in all different shapes and sizes and everything.
It's just not I Street.
Right. But it does include I Street. And I say that because I used to feel very strongly more about the choice than just ignorance. And so when I would talk about how our neighborhoods became, as you know, I teach history on our country and our city.
And this is at CSUS.
Yeah. I'm a professor at Sac State, but I teach it everywhere. I've taught at San Francisco PD, the major city chiefs.
Someone was asking, it's like, Chief Hahn, he's teaching. I said, I believe it's Sac State. Maybe it's ARC, but I think it's Sac State.
And plenty of other places aren't like paid jobs, but yeah.
I digress, I'm sorry.
But so what I get every time I do that, or especially when I was chief, is letters and things that said, we've never had segregation in Sacramento. We've never had slavery in California. All these things I would talk about, they say, that's not true. That never happened here. That was either a long time ago or in the South, which is, if you know your history, that's just not true. I mean, it's a fact that we had all of those things. The reason why black families moved to Oak Park is one of the very few neighborhoods in Sacramento they could live, because Land Park, Curtis Park, East Sac, River Park were all racially segregated. If you were a minority, you couldn't live there unless you were a servant for the people that lived there. You couldn't rent or own. But then I started thinking, they don't know this because they've never been taught this. Well, I mean, I've got a master's degree. I've had history classes in high school, elementary school, undergraduate, graduate school. Not once was I taught any of this. None of it. Matter of fact, I was taught things that just flat out aren't true, like we all were. So if you're 25, 30 years old and you've been taught certain things or not taught certain things your whole life, and then this one joker chief comes around and tells you, no, we had this, and this is what this impacts, and this is how this became this. Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of people that go, nah, my history teacher didn't tell me that. My college professor didn't tell me that. And so I just think it's one of those things that you have to hear it more than once from credible messengers that each individual, and for everybody that's different, trusts. And so the more I talk and the more other people talk about it, because if you know how, say, Oak Park became Oak Park, then it gives you better insight of what needs to be done to help improve the lives of people in Oak Park. If all you think is, well, the reason why the Heights is the way it is because people there just need to get a job and they need to quit shooting each other. There's just a bunch of violent people live there that's built out of bias and all that. Well, maybe arresting people sounds like the right idea. But if you know that the reason the Heights became the way it is because first it became impoverished, and then through poverty came more crime, and it's been like that for decades, then maybe that changes what you think needs to be addressed.
You were, it's funny, as you're speaking, I'm reminiscing because, get me emotional, because when I shared here in this space, when my parents moved here from Bakersfield in '67, 4th and 5th grade at Bret Hart, it was right there on 6th Avenue and 33rd Street. It wasn't a universe of choices that were open. Didn't know it then. I thought we were living the dream. Had a nice house, right? It was community. Walk across McClatchy Park, Oak Park, to Ben Franklin to get my little model airplanes. It was community. About the time we left to move to Fresno, my father was both electrical contractor but church planter. Went to Fresno. When we came back, he purchased acreage out in Alberta. Fast forward a few years, they downsized, sold that. Where did we end up? Norwood and Ford Avenue.
Know exactly where that's at.
In Del Paso Heights. And this is, we weren't rich, but we weren't poor. It's not a coincidence that it's like the universe of options that were available to my family. Oak Park, Del Paso Heights. And to your point, I remember Del Paso Boulevard and Little Joe's and the Bank of America you spoke about. And it was a buzz of community. You go there now, it's sad. Chief, I'm run out of time, but either indigestion or divine serendipity. I want to propose something, and I'm sincere as a heart attack right now. So you can say no, but you'll be on record of saying no. Would you be willing to chair a conversation on this very subject? It could be the Guild Theater. It could be this space. I don't care. By invitation, certain folks, and we start to have that dialogue, real dialogue, not who's going to get the next $10,000 to buy some basketballs and some lights. I'm done with that. I'm through with that. But to have some real transformational dialogue. I don't know where it would go. But if Chief Hahn is the marquee, you're guaranteed
no one will show up.
Just the opposite. You will guaranteed to pull a crowd. I'd like you to do that. I will be your wingman. I will assist you in any way, shape, or form possible to do that. But to have that conference, it could be one and done, but there at least needs to be one.
It's funny you say serendipity, or I can't remember the other word.
Indigestion.
Oh, well, yeah, okay. We'll stick with serendipity.
Divine serendipity.
There you go. Another pastor friend of mine just asked me that same thing earlier this week. So the answer is yes. I think planning that is probably going to be the most important part. How do we do something that when we walk away like so many other things where
that was fine.
it was
So what
one
do we
day,
do with
and
that?
we go back to our lives and nothing
Correct.
really changes. So absolutely, yes.
Okay. Well, you've heard it here first. Chief Daniel Hahn, Paren, retired, closed Paren, child of God and on a mission. Thank you so much for entering this space again. This is far from your last time here. Thank you so much for everything that you do.
Thank you for having me.